Thank you very, very much, Paul. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Paul, can I begin by, can you hear me at the back? Yes? Can I begin by congratulating you, Paul, on an excellent speech? I'm delighted to find that my own speech closely resembles, or at least partly resembles, the press release that you've quoted. It was only the other day, ladies and gentlemen, that I had the final confirmation that this is the most attractive and sought-after city in Europe, when I read that not only is former French President Nicolas Sarkozy in search of a London address as he flees the tyrannous taxation of the socialist government in Paris, but even better, he is bringing his wife, Carla Bruni. And I can imagine that the news has broken like a thunderclap over the grief-stricken people of Paris, and they are begging Carla to stay behind. And the partisans of Paris are saying that London is nowhere near stylish or sophisticated enough to receive the chinchilla-clad form of Carla and her Cuban-heeled paramour. So let me ask you, he's not in office anymore, doesn't matter. Let me ask you, my friends, is London ready for Carla? I think we're ready. Do you remember there was an American politician who came over here a few months ago and mused about whether we were ready for the Olympic and Paralympic Games and whether our tube network would cope? Remember that? A guy called Mitt Romney. I don't know what happened to him, but I do know that we put on the greatest Olympic and Paralympic Games ever, did we not? And the tube ran on time, and the G4S guards all turned up, and Team GB won more medals per head than any country on the planet, and the whole population was so buoyed up as though it was as if we'd been crop dusted with serotonin, and the world saw London, a city that was beautiful and that functioned well, welcoming, diverse, generous, optimistic, multinational, multicultural, where crime is falling, where the murder rate is down to levels not seen since the 1960s, a fifth of that of New York, a city where we are constantly working, many, many people in this room, to improve the quality of life. Cleaner buses, at least in my case, we're working on that. New hop-on, hop-off, fall-over, Route Master-style bus we got there. Banker-funded bicycles. A city where historic buildings coexist with fantastic modern architecture, and each intensifies the interest of the other. And that, I think, is why Carla and Nicolas are thinking of coming to London. And the only downside is that they will, of course, join the hordes of well-heeled international investors in London property who have collectively pushed prices so high that there are millions of Londoners who cannot afford the cost of housing, millions of Londoners who can't afford to rent, millions of hard-working families who now do not have a hope of buying a home in this city in the way that perhaps their parents or their grandparents could have expected to do. So, in the immortal words of Chris Huhn, to Vicky Price, there are 3 points I want to get across to you tonight. Baby. Actually, I don't know whether he said baby, but anyway, there are 3 points I want to get across to you tonight. Number one. Seriously, we have a housing crisis in London on a scale that is not, I think, properly understood in government. We have a population that has increased by 600,000 since I've been mayor. we're likely to reach 9 million, no thanks to me by the way, but we're likely to reach 9 million people by the end of this decade. Overtaking New York, we will hit 10 million by 2031. And with an ever greater share of Londoners' income spent on housing, with our workforce facing longer and longer commuting times, it is no surprise that the CBI now identifies housing above transport as the single biggest cause of economic inefficiency. And my officials in City Hall estimate that to meet that challenge, and you may have, I'm delighted that, Paul, that you said I was going to produce some surprises tonight. I picked up my Evening Standard to see that they had some elements of my speech. To meet that challenge, we estimate that we will need 1 million homes over the next 25 years. But my second point is that we can meet that challenge. We have the land to do it. 80% of the homes we need could be built on the 18 brownfield opportunity areas that have already been identified around London. We have the boroughs. Anybody here from the boroughs? We have the boroughs wanting to build more, and I completely agree with you. You agree with me, I agree with you, we all agree with each other. The boroughs would build more if only the government would lift the cap on borrowing for housing investment, as they have in other European countries. We have housing associations. Anybody, any housing associations here? We have housing associations wanting to build more, aren't you? You want to build more, don't you? If only you could see a longer-term settlement beyond 2015 for housing. We have, in London, we have 180,000 homes that have been consented but are not being built for one reason or another. My message to developers who are sitting on their hands is that they had better get on with it. And we will not rule out using CPO powers where that is appropriate and necessary. We have pension funds. Any pension funds here? Where are they? We'll bring them round the table. We have pension funds who are willing to pile in, or so they continually say. We have, or at least the GLA has, that's me, or rather that's not me, that's Rick Blakeway, David Luntz, we in the Great London Authority, we have 600 hectares of land. And we've put, so far, since I was re-elected in May last year, we've put land worth £1.2 billion out there for development. And we've got, of course, new powers. The GLA has new powers to invest in housing. We only lack one thing, and I come to my third and last point. We need a stable and continuous stream of funding. We need to recognize that housing is not a commodity like a car. Housing is infrastructure. And like any other vital infrastructure for our city, it needs long-term vision and investment. Londoners are being let down by a stop-start funding system that makes it much harder for developers to borrow and invest in the big projects that we need. That's why I think it's now fair and right that London government should be given our share of stamp duty receipts as a continuous and reliable stream of cash for investment in London's housing. Thank you for that ripple. And anybody who wants to turn it into a tumultuous roar, feel free to do so. Stamp duty revenue, after all, comes disproportionately from this city. And those yields are so high for the Treasury, precisely because property here in London is so expensive and so scarce. The problem we need to address. And with the £1.3 billion of stamp duty allocated to London, which is roughly the same as the historic annual grant, we would have the vital certainty to build the homes we need. It's the right policy for our city. It's the right thing for the squeezed middle, the people who can neither afford the Carla and Nicola, the top-end stuff, the people who don't qualify for social housing. It's the right thing for that huge, huge chunk of people that we need for our economy. It's the right thing for the whole UK economy, by the way. We have some very powerful people here in this room. It's the right thing for the whole of the UK. Don't forget that 1 in 4 London SMEs is in construction. The programme will create hundreds of thousands of jobs in London, but it will also drive jobs and growth in the brick factories, the tile factories of the Midlands. It's the right thing for London, the locomotive of the UK economy. If we can give Londoners a city that is safe, where transport is excellent, where we're continually doing things to improve the quality of their lives, and where they can afford to live, then there is no limit to what we can achieve in London. When Carla and Nicola come here, they will find a city that not only has more Michelin-starred restaurants than Paris, also if I'm wrong in that statistic, I will go to Paris to apologize and verify. But what I am certain of, we certainly have more museums than Paris and more theatres. But we're also, and I'm absolutely certain of this, a city that exports tea to China from Sutton, bikes to Holland from Chiswick, TV aerials to Korea from Wandsworth, cake, chocolate cake, in ever-growing quantities from Waltham Forest to France. And I was delighted to see we export scent, lavender scent, grown, picked, distilled, perfected in the London borough of Croydon. From Croydon to Paris, ladies and gentlemen, it's absolutely true. Where I have no doubt, and that is the city that they will find when they come. I also want them to find, and this is the key point, I want them to find a city where the PA who has to deal with Nicola and the aromatherapist who emery boards or whatever aromatherapists do, Carla's nails, the safer neighborhood officers who will keep their streets amongst the safest in Europe, the teacher who instructs the little Sarkozettes in English, the chauffeur, the waiters, all the Londoners who will benefit one way or another from the arrival of this French cash. I want them all to be able to live within a reasonable distance of their place of work, close enough to be able to do their jobs. And that is why we are going to build those Londoners the homes they need, to ensure the long-term efficiency and competitiveness of the greatest city on earth. Thank you very much to everybody at the Chartered Institute of Housing. Thank you for waiting for so long for your dinner. And some of you seem to have been, at least one person in the audience looks as though he hasn't eaten for a very considerable time. Thank you, Paul, for your encouragement in what you said, and for the ambition that you reflect in your vision of housing strategy for this country. Let us work together to give Londoners and this country the housing that it needs. Thank you very much.